Got a good group here. All right. Where is Brian on the screen? There you are. Okay. Yeah, this gets odd. You're talking to somebody, and then as you explode the screen, you lose the person and have to reestablish contact there. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Tuesday morning. We'll be letting people in, as we always do, as they come on. Just a note that is recorded. And we will be using some of it for social media and on our website, either in whole or part, depending on where we are with all of our communications. But very happy this morning to be featuring Brian Molisse, Molisse Realty. Brian has been on our executive committee now for a couple of years. He was on our board for a few years before that. And more important for some of our work, he was one of the pioneers on our housing committee. He helped with the year-long development of our housing agenda and brought incredible expertise to that discussion and continues to do that. We've been, if you listen to my WATD interviews on Tuesday morning, last week we did something on real estate, and I was quoting Brian, and we've been doing updates with housing groups around the state on real estate to find out what we're all seeing. And Courtney and I have been quoting Brian quite a bit based on what he's telling us about market intelligence, about what's happening with real estate. So Brian, we like to do a few things with this. Like to kind of get to know the person behind the name. Molisse Realty is a big brand name on the South Shore. I think many of our members probably know the name, and just because of numbers, some would know you, but not everybody. So, give us a little background about how you got started in this and your professional background and where you've been in the industry, particularly your national association.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I hope this will be helpful, what I'm going to talk about today. But I started the company by myself in 2008, which, if you remember, was not the best time to start a company. But I saw it as a great opportunity to, marketing was cheap, everything like that. I started by myself, and, I did not intend to grow to the, where we are today. I've been really fortunate. I have a great staff. I have about 90 agents right now, and we just expanded to our 5th office in Boston during the pandemic. And so I obviously like challenging times to try to open up something. And, for us, I, grew up on the South Shore. I grew up in Weymouth. I have a brother that works for me. A lot of people think Mike owns the company, so they don't relate this space to it. So you are right about that, because Mike happens to be a politician in Weymouth. He's a great guy. He knows everyone in town. My dad lives with him now. So grew up 6 kids, South Shore in Weymouth. Ended up moving down to Marshfield. That's where we have an office down there. So we have Weymouth, Marshfield, Situate, Manchester by the Sea, and now we have Boston on Atlantic Ave. I have 3 children who are not, one's involved in the business. My son Tyler is going to be 24 this year. He's actually in the seminary, and he's out in Florence, Italy. This year, during the pandemic, he was in Sicily by himself. So he had a challenging experience this year, but fortunate enough, on 4th of July, he was able to come home. So he's home now. He's in Connecticut, and he goes back to Florence August 31st. I have another daughter, Mariah. She's going to be graduating from UMass Boston. She actually works for me with my accounting end of it, with bookkeeping and stuff. It's been amazing having her part of the business. And my daughter, Olivia, she will be a sophomore at University of Arizona this year. So with all that, I have a house on the North Shore. I'm engaged to Jessica, who actually runs my office up here. And she has 3 triplet girls who are all 16. So Yeah, we keep busy, so it's a fun business, and I've been blessed. Honestly, where we are today, but honestly, it goes back to my staff and the people in our business. When I got in the business, my father thought I was crazy. My father's 84. He's like, "What are you doing?" Because just to give you a little history, I was in the nonprofit field. I worked for the May Institute for many, many years. Andrea Pike, I saw on the call. That's how I met Andrea years ago. And I was the facilities manager, and I got my home inspector's license. And, I started off part-time back in 2005 in real estate. And fortunate enough, I was able to open my own company at 2008. So that's a little history about myself.
So your dad was surprised you went into it and questioned it. What did your mom and dad do?
So my dad, believe it or not, owned his own businesses growing up. He had grocery stores. So he was self-employed himself. But for me, I think, it was an opportunity where I worked for the May Institute, vacation, company truck, a good salary and everything. But I just always really loved real estate. I liked going open houses. I had by growing up, I was the youngest of six, but growing up in the industry of, the stores, I liked dealing with people. So that was fun. As far as I knew that would be interesting, dealing with people. And from the field I dealt with the May Institute, I dealt with a lot of people there. There was, I think, 160 group homes at the time we oversaw. So, for me, it was one of those things where it was kind of like the fire in the belly. I wanted to get into real estate. And within 6 months after getting my license, I was full-time into real estate and never looked back. So it's been a fun journey, honestly. I wake up every day. I love what I do. Obviously, there's days that are challenging. But honestly, like with almost 90 agents now, I run the company. That's my job now. It took me, and I'm telling you guys this, it took me 10 years to know my business. I know my business now. I was just actively selling. I was kind of running all over the place a little bit. Now I could tell you every number in my business. I could tell you what my electric cost here, what my budgets are. And it took me a long time. Just so you guys know, I never went to college. I was in the trades. I went to 103. I was an electrician studying to be an electrician over there. Back in '87, the market went tank again. So I ended up getting into the facilities end. So no college education, no business degree or anything like that. So it was kind of like self-learning, but I surrounded myself with the right people. And I've been fortunate enough to have the right people around me that guide me and, talk to me and kind of, I'll run a lot of things by certain people that I really trust. And it's been a great experience. And I've met so many people in the industry that I admire. I got involved in chamber, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later. And then I was on the board for the local board. I was the president of the local board for South Shore Realtors. I was on the MAR board. I was on director on the MAR board, which is the Massachusetts Association, and I was a director on the National Association. So I've kind of I liked, their organizations to learn about the business and meet a lot of different people. Like you said, I was on the housing committee with Chris. That's how we met. And it was a great opportunity for me because you're surrounding yourself with people that you would never, ever, ever meet. Like Chris, we had a great group there. It was amazing. And the people that I've met through the association, through the chamber, these people, like Rich Bale, to give you an example, reached out to me yesterday to wish me luck and sorry you couldn't make the call. Like, Rich, was really impressive that he reached out to me. But you meet these people in the board that you can run questions by. I run questions by Jackie. So for me as a small business, when you open a small business, I didn't know what to do other than to buy a sign and hang a shingle and basically not know what to do. But I think in hindsight, looking now, for someone opening a small business, we have so many resources there, and this is not a sales pitch, as far as with the chamber, that is unbelievable, that I wish I knew then what I know now.
So I'm going to touch on a couple of things on this theme. First of all, I should say the Chris you're talking about is Chris Odlifson, who's
Correct.
joined Rockland Trust. Could everybody just use the chat feature and enter in your name and company? Because there were some people that I don't know on the sign-up sheet, so it might be a way rather than having everyone introduce themselves verbally. And just a heads up to Derek Riley. As we get into movement in real estate, I'm going to be calling on you to tell us what you're seeing in the moving industry, moving in storage. So don't go away for a long coffee break. You mentioned, Brian, that it took 10 years to know your business. So I want to pick up on that theme because knowing your business means three things to me. It means knowing your industry. It means knowing your actual operation and how your numbers work. And it means knowing yourself. What kind of leader are you? And all of those change over time. And you've been in this industry for a long time. So I'm wondering if we could pull at each of those a little bit. Where did you learn the real estate industry? Not running your shop, but how did you learn about the industry, and who were the mentors? Was it all self-taught?
Great question. Honestly, with my background was facilities, so I knew houses, so that was no problem. My father, and I'm going to tell you this, when I got in the business, he said, "You're too honest, you're going to get eaten up and spit out." He's like, that sales is a cutthroat business. He goes, you're a guy that I don't know. He goes, and I go, "Dad, I'm going to be first honest realtor," just joking. And he's like, I go, "I'm not going to look back." And, I just, I wanted to treat people the way I wanted to be treated. If someone doesn't buy a house, it's not, it's one of those things where it's not going to affect us, in the business, because they'll eventually buy a home. So I learned, watching different people. One person I asked, I'll never forget, it was at a function, and I said, "Can you give me the best advice that I can know as far as being in real estate?" He goes, "Listen." And that was a big thing to me, listening to what people want and finding out what they want. And you can really help narrow down their search and obviously do that. I've sold houses for people that have, many, I'll give you an example. One of the owners of Tedeschi's, I sold his house. He knew a ton of people. He reached out to me, and he was asking me for my resources. And it was one of those things where it's a trust thing. If people trust you, they're, gonna rely on you, and you just got to make sure that you have the right people around you to basically pinpoint, point them to. So I've learned a lot from people in the industry as far as different leaders in the industry, watching how they conduct business. Jack Conway was a huge person that I looked up to and I think I've told the story before, but with Jack, an interesting story about Jack was, I went to see Tony Robbins, I don't know, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And one thing that stuck in my mind, he said, when you get back, reach out to someone that you look up to, not just business-wise, how they run their business, but how they conduct themselves, blah, blah, blah. So I was at an open house, and I wrote in a letter to Jack Conway. And I got a call at an open house one day. He goes, "Hello, Brian, this is Jack." And I'm like, "Jack?" He goes, "Jack Conway." And I go, "Hi, Mr. Conway." He goes, "No, call me Jack." And the interesting part of the story was, I asked him to go out to lunch, and he told me that no one's ever done this before. He's like, "No one's ever asked that." And he goes, "Absolutely." He goes, so he called me, and he said, "I'm going to give you 3 hours of my time." He says, "We're going to go to the office. We'll spend an hour. Then we're going to go out to lunch." I said, "Great." He said, "I'd love to buy you lunch." He's like, "Fine." So he went to the office. He goes, "You seem like an honest guy." We talked about my son. We talked about life and, his business, and Patty, his wife, and Carol, and everyone like that. And it was just me and Jack in the office. And he goes, "You can ask me any question as long as you promise me you won't, repeat it out there." And it was more obviously about business. And I asked him, a lot of different questions about the business, how Jack got started. And Jack, just so you know, has an amazing background as far as how he got started being in the paper industry and opening his first office and how he did that. So we went out to Chili's, and I have a picture in my office on my desk. It's myself and Jack. And we went out to lunch, and he was so funny. He wouldn't let me buy lunch. And we had such a great day. On the way back, he called his wife, Patty, and he said, "Patty, it's Brian Molisse, the kid that wrote me the letter. Remember, he wrote me the letter? No one's ever wrote me a letter to get together to lunch." And he said to me, and I'll never forget his words, he goes, "You got the fire in the belly." He goes, "I'd love for you to come to work for me." He says, "But," he goes, "you're like me, you get the fire." And I was about 40. He goes, "You get the fire in the belly." And Jack was a huge mentor, not because of just the business, how he treated his agents. Jack was unbelievable. His agents were so loyal to him, as far as they loved him, and his charitable. Jack had the heart of gold. Same with Patty and Carol, the whole family. So he was someone that I think, that's a great question, who I probably most looked up to in the industry was Jack. And I think about him a lot because how I conduct my business with the agents, you have to be there for them. You have to know that you take a bullet for them, and just be there for them. And Jack was one of those people that I didn't know Jack. I never worked for Jack, but I'd watched Jack. I watched him at meetings. I watched him at MAR. I watched him at the National. He was just a very charismatic guy that basically treated people right. So Jack would definitely have been my mentor.
The South Shore is a small place, but and people are so interconnected. But I think it's a little uncommon that somebody in business would heap such praise on another business in the same field, and do that to the leader. I think that really speaks volumes about you. That Jack Conway Company, of course, is a big player in the field, probably the biggest player in Eastern.
Independent brokerage, yeah.
And for you to come on when you have a chance to promote yourself and give so much credit to Conway Company and Jack is, I think, pretty impressive. It says a lot about you. Probably goes to why people trust you and why you grew the business, why you've been able.
Jack was just a unique man that I was fortunate enough to meet. I wish I knew him many years longer, but he would call me when I became president. He called me, when Tim Cahill was running for governor, happened to show up at the office. Jack called me and said, "I saw your picture in the paper." That was Jack. Jack was just Jack. I don't know. Everyone loved Jack, and in our business, there's enough food on the table for everyone. And the way that Jack ran his business. My thing is, I just admired the way he treated his agents, how he was so charitable. He wrote books. Jack was just and what a family guy. Like what him and Patty's relationship, his wife, was just amazing to see, as far as how much he cared for her and, how much she cared for him. To see that, and to see how his company grew because of the way he treated people. That was one of the things that I looked up to most about Jack.
So you said it took you about 10 years to know the business, and then you qualified that by saying the numbers, the actual business of running a business. Who taught you that? Did you surround yourself with great professionals? Did you just learn a lot from mistakes? Did you just go out to some of your banker friends and say, how do you make this work? How do these numbers?
The interesting part, I started my business with $20,000 in the bank, make it or break it, in 2008. And it's God's honest truth. I was married at the time, and we were like, I came home with a sign. There's a picture in my office, my son and my son Tyler. And we brought home a sign, and my wife at the time said to me, "What's the sign about?" And I go, "I opened my own company." And my sister got a call that day from my cousin driving by Hanover saying, "Did your brother open a company?" She's like, "I don't know." And we opened the company. And it was one of those things where when you say about knowing your business, I never knew my business. I was selling probably 40 houses myself a year. I had people working, small, but I was just spending money. I didn't know my business as far as what I was spending in marketing. If someone, "Oh yeah, we'll do that, we'll do this, we'll do that." So I think, for me, I was just spending recklessly. I do have a person that I really trust. Her name's Lynn. She's like what she is basically like a floating CFO for companies. And she basically guides me. Like Lynn, I joke, is like a second wife to me. She's like my mother to me. She's been with me through it all. and I'll ask her, can we buy a new moving truck? Lynn will give me permission. So, but that took a long time. I think when you open a business, for me, I joke now because people are like, oh, do you want to do this? You know, what about this? What if you had to cut this? I'm like, my ego's gone. My ego, when you get into the business, your ego is there, meaning I want to grow, I want to do this. Then you get business sensed and you're like, does this make sense to keep this or whatever? And it took me 10 years to know the ins and outs of how much my marketing was costing, how much my staff was costing, how much, you know, each office was costing, you know, our spreadsheets as far as what Marshfield's making, what's Manchester's making, what Situate's making. So it took me 10 years to really step back, because I got to the point where I had to stop selling and go, okay, these people are all counting on me. I need to focus on the company to make sure that's strong, that we can continue through different times. And, you know, with rebranding and all that stuff. So I wasn't a marketing person. I have a marketing person that works for me, and he's amazing. So you know, surrounding yourself with the right people. You know, if you read the book Think and Grow Rich, which was an amazing book by Napoleon Hill, I go to that book all the time, and it was talking about, you know, when they, during the industry, like, you know, you might not be the smartest person, but at least if you have buttons on your desk and you know who to hit for the right person to talk to make sure you're making the right decision, which is going to affect everyone. And I felt like I just had to sit back and go, okay, you know, spend the money. Who's the right person for this, to do this, to do this? And it, you know, in turn, you know, it made sense. Our marketing's so different than it probably was 10 years ago. It's more like, you know, pinpointed at what works. Before, I was just kind of throwing everything out and spending a lot of money. Now it's more so like, okay, what really works? You know, my staff, like each office has staff there. I had to make sure that they're the right fit. So you become a lot of different things when you own your own business, but the resources are out there. It's just finding the right resources that work for you. And finding, you know, the last thing that you mentioned about knowing yourself. Yeah, it took me 10 years to know myself and where I should be in my business. So, you know, actively selling, yes. Will I sell like a family member's house here and there? Yeah, absolutely. But I have an amazing team that I can refer to. So I have 90 agents. If someone wants to sell up in Attleboro, I know that Celeste Robin, who works for me, is that person. If I have a person that wants to sell in the water, it's kind of like pinpointing things like that. I know for me, my job right now is to run my company, and I absolutely love running the company. So, but it took me 10 years to really know what my position should be, other than, you know, kind of like what Chris said earlier today before we met, you know, like I just felt like I was all over the place. I was like, I didn't know where to go, you know, as far as what should I do, you know, because I'm watching other companies. But one thing I never did was because what you mentioned was, I never looked at the numbers so hard that I felt like other people were competition to me. I just focused on what we had to do to make ourselves better. And, you know, as far as with us, be unique, do different things. With people, we do moving trucks. That came out of California. Free moving trucks for anyone with charities, or anyone that buys themselves with a home. Pretty much 90% of the time, the trucks are used by charity. And one thing is, for me, I get calls from people thanking me. I look at it as it's a marketing tool. I said, please don't, you know, it's one of those things where we're fortunate enough that we're able to offer it out. But, you know, for us, you know, different marketing ideas came from me from out in California. I go to a lot of conferences, so I was able to pick up different things that way.
So I hate the superlative questions, because whenever I get them, I get stumped thinking, gee, was that mistake the worst mistake or the second worst mistake? And it slows the conversation for me. But your best move and your biggest mistakes in the industry, were they on running the business or something with the industry?
Mine was probably running the business, because, for instance, at one point we opened an office down in Plymouth, and it was more of an ego move for me at the time. That's where I said my ego left. You know, it's like, okay, you're in business. I'm going to grow this business, and I'm going to just, you know, because I was fortunate out. I bought 3 companies. 2 companies really worked that I bought out that came to Molisse. And one company at the time was in Plymouth, and I bought this company. and I knew nothing about Plymouth. I wanted my sign there and everything like that. And after a year, I had to like let my ego go and say, you know what, this is not the best place for us to be. And I had to close the doors there, which was hard, because, you invested in an area, but it just didn't make business sense. So I think for me, it was like taking ego out of the way and making the right business decision was probably the hardest. I think for anyone when you have to close the doors on something, but I knew it was what's best for the company. And as far as if you want to say what the best, thing that's probably happened with my company is honestly is when we're all together and I see people, I've had people, one thing about our company, which we're fortunate, people don't leave, they stay with us. And I think it comes down to, that they know that I'm behind them 110%. And that they're, we're known as a company that people say they're so ethical and all that. We don't put signs up, we're hiring. Anyone that comes in to, come aboard, I actually physically meet with them and make sure that they have the same vision that we have as far as what an agent should be. It's not about the money. It's, basically one of those things when I first started in the business, like I said, 3 kids, young kids, and I was like, okay, how am I going to make it? And the thing was, you can't get into a business just because of a lot of money. Money will flow down the road if you treat people right and it comes back. One thing I can tell you about every house that I sold to the years that I sold, I feel like during the holidays, I could reach out to them and get together because they knew that I had their back. Money never got in the way. And I think that's one thing where I think, in business, it's like, oh, I'm going to get into this business because I can make a lot of money. If you don't wake up and love your job every day, that's the wrong business for you. You shouldn't be in that business because, it's one of those things where if it's not satisfying for you and you're not going to do your all and give your 110%, it's one of those things where you got to pick a different business because in this business, things change. Chris will tell you, the market changes, daily. So it's one of those things where you're either in it for the long haul or, it's like, choose a different business. Other businesses that I looked at, growing up in the, this, grocery store business with my dad, I looked at that. This was just one of those things that came to me and I said, I love real estate. And I love looking at houses. I'm always looking at houses, but it was like dealing with people I really enjoy.
Good. How's the industry changing? What is the market right now?
The market, believe it or not, right now is absolutely insane to the point where probably we've never seen it that way. Just to give you a little update from last year to, during the pandemic. So June, so like end of June, we were up over 15% during the pandemic, which made no sense at all. Like, why is that, the case? The thing is that people now, it's kind of like, it's a strange time right now, but, like in the industry, rates are really low right now. Someone just closed on a loan the other day and believe it or not, it was under 3% these people got a loan for. It fluctuates, but you have a lot of people that now the time it's a seller's market, people are selling, at the highest numbers probably that they, that's been around for a while. And you have buyers that, obviously want to get into communities. Rents are through the roof. So it's, we're seeing that older people are actually selling their bigger houses and they're going other places, whether they're going to in-laws. I have a client that's going to Texas. Some people are going to the Carolinas. So you're starting to see more and more people. But the interesting part about it is houses that are going over asking price right now, and they're selling so quick. But the amazing part to it is, I mentioned this to you last week, is how much cash is out there on the street as far as people paying cash. They're taking money out of their stock market and buying real estate as an investment. So we're seeing that a lot across the board.
How do you think the industry may look next year or change? You think housing products are going to change, housing types and preferences? We're going to see a big turnover of population here as people cash out. Is this going to be the preferred destination as people leave Boston, or is it going to be other suburban areas around
Well, the
Boston?
interesting part is a lot of people that work in the city now are not even in their offices anymore. We have a Boston office on Atlantic Ave. Hotels are closed. We're in Regis Building, which is a big player as far as in Boston. It's empty. A lot of people now, a friend of mine, I think I told you, has 4,000 square feet in Boston. His lease is coming up in, I think, the end of August. He's not going back. They're going to all work from home, which was interesting. I was talking to someone the other day. If you asked me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, would virtual work? I'd be like, no, it doesn't work. It can't work. It's too, all these people that I talk to, and Chris would probably chime in, that, you know, they're saying that it's amazing how much more work is getting done going virtual. So you're starting to see a lot of people calling us saying, listen, we're thinking about moving, but we want a home office, home office, home office, home office. Oh, what's going on? Oh, well, the thing is that so-and-so is going to be working from home now. So he wants his privacy, or she wants her privacy from there. So they're buying bigger homes because they're not going to be going back to the office. So they want to be able to have a home that has the pool, that they have everything there. So we find that really interesting because, you know, with it, that's what's going to be interesting, what's going to go on in Boston and stuff like that. But, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, shared office space, you're starting to see, I think that's going to be a big player down on the South Shore, where people maybe don't want to work from home, but they're going to stay local. They're not going to go into Boston. So I think you're going to start to see more of that, because a lot of people are talking about not going back for a long period of time. And I think as far as when we were shut down, if you want to say, you know, people were working from home. All our staff, you know, was working from home. You know, utilities were down. Everything was down. It was so much cheaper. So I think people are looking at, as far as business owners, saying, listen, I know that these people can work from home. They're not commuting, so they're not spending an hour in the car or whatever. But I find it fascinating because I've talked to CEOs, I've talked to business owners, and they said the production's been through the roof since they went virtual. And they said it doesn't make any sense to go back to that. So like I said, we're starting to see it where people are now looking for homes that can, you know, obviously work, that they can work from home.
And does that apply to the younger professionals, those in their 20s who, you know, 7 months ago, we predicted were being priced out of the Boston housing market? Now the situation may be changed. The Boston housing market might not be as bad, but they don't need to be in the city either. Are you seeing any of that, or is
It's
that
kind of
still?
all across the South Shore, to be honest with you. Weymouth is, but you know, obviously we have an office in Weymouth, and we're selling in Braintree, Quincy. A lot of people are buying there, and there are a lot of younger couples. You got people relocating from different areas. New York's a hot spot, coming to Boston now. A lot of people leaving New York. You got people coming from California, who's, you know, basically they're not even shocked with the prices, you know, here compared to California. So you have a lot of people relocating here, and believe it or not, they're relocating here to work virtual, which is interesting. So we're starting to see that, you know, as far as buyers, it's a mixed array. It's, you know, people are looking at it saying, listen, if, you know, rents are up right now and it's tough to get rentals. So what they're paying for rent, even though the house prices might be up, with the rates so low, they're looking at it as an opportunity as having a write-off and basically being able to work, you know, close from home. Close
Chris
to home.
Can I put you on the spot, Chris? Are you seeing any numbers yet through Rockland Trust or the banking industry with mortgages, and sense of who's moving and what's happening with real estate?
Well, we're seeing we're in another huge refi boom, just enormous. The refi, I mean, a few years ago the refi boom started, and we kept thinking that it's going to be over soon, and it's just booming even more. I mean, this is the boom to end all booms right now. I think there was a stat out there that said, I think Brian, maybe you know this one, 70% of the mortgages in the U.S. maybe in the money to refi. I mean, it's just a huge number. I have less of a feel than Brian as to sort of where people are going. I'm seeing mostly the refi volume, the coming and going and where they're moving from. I sort of get my intel from Brian.
So we've got couple of people here, Derek and George with Humboldt and Mayflower moving. And I find people in the moving industry are pretty interesting leading indicators. So let me call on Derek and George for a little market intelligence. What are you seeing? Who is moving in and from where? Who's moving out and to where? Derek?
Yeah, sure. We're seeing a lot on the local side of people going out of the city, so going into the suburbs. And so condos in the city are kind of sitting, we're seeing. And, our busy season is typically, it ramps up in May, and June and July and August are crazy. And what I've seen talking to agents is that when they slow down in March and April, they would typically slow down in July, but just like Brian was saying, they're going crazy right now. So we're going to find out, I guess, in the next couple of weeks if how the schools are going to handle it, if they're going to be going back. But our summer kind of slows down when kids go back to school. So we're interested to see, if they go virtual, we might push out into, September, October, our summer season. So, though, just like everyone, we took a hit in those early months, but it's very encouraging hearing what Brian's saying about the market, and we're seeing that as well. But yeah, we're getting a lot of relocations into Massachusetts from out of states like Florida, California, New York. So it's a very interesting year in the moving market.
Who's leaving the state? Where are they going to?
I've got people going to Texas, the Carolinas. I've got a few going to California, actually. It's kind of all over the map, but we are seeing a lot of influx of people coming into this state as well.
Yeah. George, what are you seeing?
Similar to what Derek was saying is that, we're seeing the pent-up demand from the springtime all of a sudden coming hot and heavy now to the point where, like Derek said, I see it going out until October as far as our peak season. And similar to Derek, I see a lot of stuff going to Texas, surprisingly. Texas and the Carolinas, some stuff to Georgia, not too much, but there seems to be an exit going to Texas more than I've seen before. As far as the local stuff, it's like similar to what Derek was saying, we've got people moving out of the city out into the suburbs. There is some stuff going into the city, but not as much as I usually see.
Yep. Are you finding, by the way, with moves that people are bringing less stuff with them as they move around? My wife has me continuously cleaning out the attic and the basement and the garage during this. And
Yes.
we weren't moving houses, so I don't know if one of us is planning to move or what, but I keep going to the transfer station and dump, and I think she's convinced that if we move, we're going to put it all in a RAV and not get a truck and take stuff with us.
Yes, we do see that. We even have the container model, both United and Mayflower, as our container model. So if you want to move one box of stuff, and it's a big box, but it's a different model than it used to be, and there's more and more of the centralized transport system that's being built throughout the United States. And Derek might want to chime in on that as well. But we see a lot of the downsizing of furniture and goods. People aren't moving as much. I mean, families to some degrees are, but the younger folks are moving less and taking less with them because there's not that connection to the furniture that other families had that I've seen before.
Yep.
Peter, one person I'd love to chime in is Mark Stiles. I see him on the call. Mark is a closing attorney who does a ton of business on the South Shore, so I'd love to get his perspective if we could.
Brian, you're the best. That was an amazing conversation. I followed Brian's career very closely as well, and the influence of Tony Robbins is we've shared that common bond, and you could just see it. And I love your success. I love the fact that you're talking about, you know, shifting markets and taking in opportunities, because I think we've got such a unique marketplace right now that it's anyone's guess, right? There's the futurists out there. There's the folks that are trying to pinpoint what's going to happen. You know, are we staring down the cliff of another collapse, or is this going to snap back? And how is residential real estate going to be a part of it? And it's interesting to try to, because we're always looking out 18 months, right? We're not looking this week, this month, but we're looking 18, 24 months out, and where is this market going to be? But when you all were talking about people commuting to this area, they're moving to this area to work remotely, I find that fascinating, because that just creates this strength in our market, right? Because people are going to be drawn to New England, to South Shore, to, you know, the Boston area, the New England area. I'm currently in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. We're expanding. We're in the process of expanding our business model into New Hampshire. So I've been meeting with architects and such. We're working on a mixed use concept here in Lincoln, New Hampshire. But the quality of life going forward for people, right? We've talked about working remote. What are the commercial buildings in downtown Boston going to do? We were talking about that 4 or 5 years ago, when you knew the technology was coming. You knew the ability to go remote was coming. What are they going to do? Are they going to retrofit them to luxury residential? Are they going to do condos? And now we're seeing this exodus from the city, which is mind-blowing and such a massive opportunity for the South Shore, which again, I feel like the South Shore is going to have that protection going forward into what might be really catastrophic for a lot of parts of the nation.
One thing that I found interesting, if you drive by Mark's office, they have a tent outside. And since the pandemic, they've been doing the closings outside of the office from day one, which if you drive through Marshfield and you see there's people out there to make sure it's happened. So, I mean, you talk about adapting. That was huge adapting as far as making sure that, you know, houses were closing, because everyone worried about this, you know, like what is going to happen to the real estate industry. And I feel, you know, obviously it's different than '08, because obviously it's, you know, this isn't real estate related, if you want to say. But with Mark, I mean, I went by there the other day. You guys were still out there doing closings out there, which is amazing, because the whole thing is, you talk about having to change on the drop of a dime, you know, in our industry. And people are calling me, you know, and my agents saying, a closing's going to happen, is like the market's just going to shut down, and they're just going to shut the door on real estate. And it was amazing to see how the state came together to really adapt to make sure that, you know, no, you can close, but you need a smoke inspection now. They've since changed that, but no, you can still close. And, you know, with Mark's office right there on the South Shore, you know, our agents do a ton of business with Mark. And the thing is, that's amazing, is that, you know, it's all outside, you know. So I don't know if you've seen it, Peter, but it's pretty remarkable when you go there and you see the tent set up and you're like, what are those people doing? And I'm like, actually, they're closing on a home. So
Barbara Holmes has a great question. Barbara, I'm going to let you ask it if you want to unmute yourself. Where are you? We'll help unmute you. Are you able to get on, Barbara?
She might not be.
How's that?
Oh, there
Did
we
it
go.
work this time?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So if you have a house that needs some TLC, should the sellers be trying to get it up to par, or are the buyers looking to do it themselves?
that's a great question. Honestly, it depends on what needs to be done. I think, you know, my advice is, you know, always been like, you know, if someone says, should I do a kitchen over? I don't think I'd say no, because the whole thing is, you might do a kitchen that's a whole different taste than the buyer. But, you know, one of those little sayings in our industry is clean houses sell, fresh paint, landscaping, things like that, you know, curb appeal. But anything too big, you know, a roof, no buyer wants to spend money on a roof. So that's one of those things, or a furnace or things like that. But it depends, I think, Barbara, on what needs to be done to know whether, it should be done prior to closing. Or prior to listing the house. Because the whole thing is that I've seen people, put kitchens in the houses, and then all of a sudden, the first buyer, it's not the kitchen that they want. I just listed a house in Braintree, we've got it under agreement. The issue there was the house was great, but people didn't have a vision on the kitchen, how the kitchen could be. Someone came in and said, you know what, I'd open up this wall, but for my client, it would have cost him probably $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to do it. And we couldn't recoup that if we tried to. So, it depends on basically what needs to be done, but obviously fresh paint, landscaping, roof, furnace, make sure the furnace is serviced, painting on the outside, things like that, floors sometimes being done. And just remember, minimal stuff in the house. That's the key, because, the problem is buyers, will look more your stuff than the house. So we say less is better. And HGTV has really helped us in our industry over the years, because a lot of people are watching that before they list or sell a home. And, it helps us because we go in there like, oh, I watched Joanna and Chip, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I watched, the property brothers, the property pros, or whatever it is. So, like I said, I think, if someone's looking to list, have the agent come in and they can give them best advice as far as what the best thing to do.
Excellent. Thank you.
Welcome.
And that was Barbara Wallstrom. I think I mistakenly called her Barbara Holmes because I was the first word of her question.
That's okay.
Let me ask Brian and Mark, because Mark mentioned he's doing mixed use up in New Hampshire. Courtney, who is up mixed use, kind of broadening it out, residential and that residential and office space, because people aren't necessarily going to work in their home, but they want to be very close to where their office is, maybe in the same building, maybe it's work share, maybe it's across the street in a mixed use. But do you see mixed use changing in its understanding from being housing and retail to housing and other things?
Do you want to go first, Mark?
Sure. Peter, you know how I feel about mixed use. I love it. I think it's the asset of the future. I think it makes sense for the community, for the landlords, for the occupants, for the town. I guess I don't understand the question other than the fact that I love it, and I think there's a massive future for those kind of concepts.
But there's definitely not enough of it as far as out there. That's the challenging part. I mean, that's where we talk about, talking to cities and towns, about the opportunity to change some things, because honestly, you could drive the strip in Marshfield 139. There's not much mixed use as far as opportunities for, I'm in a strip mall. I would love to be in a building that I could have mixed use, have a real estate office, maybe have apartments. There's nothing that would work in the zoning that we have on that strip for us to do something like that.
Yep. Yeah.
But you would ask, different than retail, what other concepts are there? I mean, Brian alluded to the shared office concept. That's one of the concepts that I'm bringing to Lincoln. So this property that we're looking at and identifying and going through the entitlements right now, one of the storefronts is going to be a similar model to a shared office complex, because we think people are going to be in all places, right? They're going to want to ski. So why not get 4 hours of really productive work done and ski in the afternoon or ski in the morning and go back and get 4 hours of really focused, productive work done? Because I think some of what people are realizing is they don't need the 8 hours where 4 hours are distractions to get what they need to get done. But people are, what we were talking about when Brian's saying people are moving to the South Shore to work remotely, the White Mountains, I'm kind of hoping, is a concept very similar to that, where people are going to go where they want to be and then do their work. and quality of life becomes much more important. And that's where a mixed use concept just makes more sense financially and for all purposes.
Yeah. So, Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot with Brian. Brian, you said you started the business crash. You're not the first person we've had on these series who said they started out during a crash, during the last crash. Is the pandemic and the recession or the fallout we're going to see from this good time for other people to start a business? I think it's going to be an interesting period of entrepreneurship as people find some new service or get some new calling for themselves, see an opportunity.
I think it comes down to, Peter, what business you're talking about. What Mark said about shared office space on the South Shore, I could see that being a real big player in the near future. Because if you have young children and you need a little space that you want a conference room, whatever, like I told you, we're doing shared office space in Boston. It's a great office. We pay cheap rent. I have an office there that I pay a private office, but I have access to all the meeting rooms, all the conference rooms, everything like that. So for us in Boston, you know, I have 4 agents that work there. They want to do a closing, they just book it on their app. So, you know, you have people that might want to work from home that have a house in Marshfield or have a house in Situate, and they say, I got to have a meeting. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Dunkin' Donuts, I can't sit there because, you know, it's all taped off or whatever. And you get a membership at one of these places that you have the opportunity to go in there and basically, you know, have a conference room, or you can do a, you know, PowerPoint and, you know, videotape everything, you know, while you're in there. So I think that on the South Shore, especially with people, so many people coming to the South Shore, I think it's a great opportunity for mixed use to do something like that. And I think it's lasting. But, you know, as far as businesses, you know, I grew up in the food business. I mean, when did you ever think restaurants would be closed down like this? Bars, not talking about whenever they're going to open. That was like a, you know, a recession-proof thing. My uncles owned bars in Boston, you know, and they were like, you know, this is years ago, you know, it was like money, guaranteed money. Now, you know, you're seeing it. So I think it's picking and choosing what the right business would be to open up in a, you know, a pandemic when you don't know when the final outcome is going to be of, you know, things opening up.
Chris, you seen some small business formation starting? Is that getting up to your level yet, that you would see people deciding they're going to, whatever industry they were in, they're out of, they're starting something else now? We're going to see a lot of it.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think that with the PPP and the what, $2 or $3 trillion of stimulus, we haven't really seen the potential wreckage sort of beginning to gain momentum. I mean, you're hearing some about the large scale bankruptcies, Neiman Marcus, Brooks Brothers, J.C. Penney, et cetera. And you're hearing stories that sort of a very micro businesses that are many of them are folding up. But I have not seen if we don't get more stimulus, we're going to see a lot more business bankruptcies. I will say this though, I am extremely hopeful about the next when we get through this pandemic. Now, there's some economists talking about that we're going to see, because of this, just an explosion of innovation, and in ways that we can't really imagine right now. I will tell you that when I think about the banking business and thinking about retail banking and so on, I mean, it's giving me great pause about what I see, some of the acceleration of the fintechs out there, about how do we avoid becoming the next buggy whip, right? How did the banking industry as we know it stay sort of on the edge and healthy and right there with our businesses and the consumers? It is going to be a rough spot the next year, but I think that the innovation that has driven this economy for a couple centuries, we're going to see another wave coming in and a growth spurt for then many years to come, if we can get this pandemic and future pandemics sort of under control.
I agree. I actually think it's an exciting 10 years ahead of us.
Mhm.
I think the South Shore is well positioned because so much of our economy, while it was residential consumer economy based on the Boston commute, a lot of entrepreneurship with people choosing lifestyle over big Boston positions and starting their own businesses here. That's sort of been the seed corn of the chamber membership for years. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. So I think it's going to be an interesting decade with people people rearranging their own personal values and businesses adopting different models and new business opportunities coming up. Pretty exciting time to actually run a chamber, except membership models aren't a great industry in this change, in this period either, but it'll be interesting. So speaking of changing business models, Brian, you know, lifestyle change and all of that, you're doing the Brady Bunch thing with triplet teenage girls. What is going through your mind? Triplet?
Exactly. The thing that's fortunate enough with them is they're great kids. They really are. They're like everyone says, triplet girls. I mean, they could not be better to me. I got to be honest with you. I'm on the South Shore a lot during the week. I have an apartment down there, so I'm sure there's days that Jess is ready to pull her hair out. But it's worked out really well. Because having majority of my office is on the South Shore. I have a place, condo down there that I stay at during the week. So I stay in, come up here typically on Fridays and I leave Monday mornings and I try to get up on a Wednesday night here and there. But with the market the way it's been, like last week, I was down Monday through Saturday. It was just crazy, end of the month on top of it. So it's, adjusting our schedules. I mean, people think we're crazy when, they call us and they're like, are you guys busy? And you talk to any other people in our industry, Mark will tell you, the market, like, honestly, we're busy or it's crazy. And, we're, like Mark said, we're, months out, if someone buys now, today, they might not be closing for another, 45 to 60 days. So, that's obviously, a couple months away where you're going to see, obviously how it's going to be interesting to see what the housing market does this year as far as towards the end. But right now, inventory, people put houses on, they price them right, multiple offers, a lot of cash offers. A house in Manchester, I told Peter the other day, sold for $10.5 million and it was a cash buyer. From New York. And, houses, we're seeing houses go 60, 70, 80,000 over asking price on the South Shore because there's bidding wars on it. And, rates are really, incredible right now. And people are like, you know what? Like Mark was saying, which I thought was important too, because he said about people skiing and stuff. Peter knows when I used to drive, I tried to commute, when I was living on the North Shore, and it would take me 2.5 hours down, 2.5 hours back. Now, if I was working virtual, that's 5 hours a day that I could do something else that was not productive. And like what Mark was saying too, is, if someone's commuting an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours a day into Boston, now they're working virtual. Now they have time to kind of like unwind because they're going to get so much more done because as you know, driving in that traffic is just, a burden on you mentally, physically, everything. So I think people are starting to see that too.
Yep. Well, Brian, thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank you, everyone.
Chamber. We appreciate your service on the executive committee and all the help you've given us with our housing work here and all the things you do in the South Shore communities that you serve in. So
Thank you, Brian. Great seeing you.
Yeah, it was great seeing everyone. Thanks everyone chiming in. Appreciate it.
All right. See you all next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you.